Hello everyone and welcome to this next video discussion in the Tech Partner Programme series. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for nearly 12 years now. I work within the Knowledge and Practice Directorate looking at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment, and with over 110,000 members working worldwide right across the property life cycle all the way through land, planning and development, construction, brokerage, valuation, finance, building and property management and end of life. Clearly our members have a huge canvas upon which data and technology is playing a very, very important part now. And indeed, our members work across all the different asset types of land itself, rural, residential, alternative assets, commercial and infrastructure. So once again, data and tech having a profound and positive effect on our profession. And I'm really happy today to have Philip from Rosetta Risk Management join me for the discussion. So Philip, please join me on the call.
Good afternoon.
Hi, great to have you on the call. And I always like to start these conversations with a better kind of human backstory. So it'd be great to hear about your backstory in the kind of property and insurance sector, and indeed the origin story of Rosetta Risk Management itself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my background, my professional background is a construction insurance broker and underwriter. For the last 21 years, it's been the sector that I've been involved in, mainly as a broker, about 75% of the time as a broker, 5 years or so as an underwriter. Started here in London with Marsh, moved to Singapore in 2006, joined Aon 2008, and like most people in insurance, jumped around a few companies since then, but sort of stayed in Singapore, up to Hong Kong for a couple of years, back to Singapore, and then back to London in 2015. But to get back to your point, where we came from in that journey was a couple of years ago. I joined a small MGA. MGA is a managing general agent, so you are regulated as a broker, as an agent, but actually you are in effect working with your insurance partners to underwrite and sell insurance policies. Most of us are buying insurance via an MGA. It's a very long-standing distribution system. And my boss at the time said, amongst other things that we were looking at doing, he said there's something going on with timber, specifically mass timber and insurance. And so he sort of gave me the task to look into this. And I'll keep this brief. It's already getting through, but with an idea to saying, look, timber is an issue for insurers, either during construction or during operation, particularly when you start using it at scale. And whilst it is one of our oldest building materials, the fundamental properties of timber give us, as insurers, a concern. Fire and water, moisture being the main ones. Obviously, we're using mass timber much more in the built environment for its net zero credentials, which is great to see. But the principles of risk and insurance and the susceptibility of that material, it means that there are some issues. So looking into that, it became very clear that a successful mass timber project relied on the quality of its design and engineering before it started. Not to confuse this now known phrase of golden thread, if we look at that from a design perspective, and I'll come on to that golden thread. From a design perspective, there's a golden thread of design when you're using mass timber or any volatile materials in a construction in an engineered system. So we did some research around that and tried to understand what best looked like, what good looked like, what bad looked like. And really, from an insurance perspective, it became clear that we could design these buildings very well, and we could use modeling and we could use performance-based testing to work out what's best. But from an insurance perspective, we need to understand that what has been designed has actually been being built. Now, this is an issue for both construction and property insurance in the world of post-Grenfell, because very sadly, we now have a situation of known unknowns. So we now know that it is likely, or it is possible, that people didn't do what they were contracted to do, and that will lead to issues around the performance of the building and therefore the risk that an insurer is taking. So when I said, well, we've got to understand the design is being implemented on site, and I said, well, what's technology doing? Because in our world of insurance, I'm sad to say that really, from my perspective, being able to attach PDFs to emails, the biggest technological advance we've had in our. To be in a defense of insurance, that there are some reasons as to why that's the case. You know, we're not like banking where there's only sort of 5 or 10 things you can do. You can really do anything with insurance as long as it's indemnifiable. So there are reasons why we haven't necessarily sort of digitized, so to speak, but we are. So anyway, so we realized, okay, well, what is out there from a tech perspective that's helping our built environment design and execute what we aspire to build? And I was blown away by the broad topic, which is the digitalization of the built environment. You know, the key themes such as BIM and digital twins, tools such as project management platforms. Then we get into the Internet of Things and safety devices and wearable tech and image capture and so on. And I was genuinely blown away. And the implications for insurance sort of came to me straight away. That we had a customer base, the insureds, who are using digital technologies. They are being asked to implement these from a government perspective on projects over £2 million. And I realized that, wow, we've got the opportunity here to get information from a construction project, pre-construction and during construction, and then with a property aspect during operation from a digital twins perspective, that goes back to what I was saying about a known unknown. It removes the unknown. It gives us the actual information. Now, that, for the most part, is of a positive benefit to all the parties of an insurance contract. And it removes the ambiguity. And ambiguity leads to price increases. So yeah. What it also does is helps the claim process. Now, it may seem strange, but insurers want claims because then that is a way of them justifying their existence. But a claim is a problem for everyone. Regardless of your level of cover, claims cost every party associated with that claim some form of pain, whether that be financial, reputational, so on and so on, emotional, right? So it doesn't matter how well insured you are, it's a problem for everyone. If you can speed up the adjustment of that claim, the apportioning of blame, and I mean that in a legal sense, not in a personal sense, you're reducing costs. If you have less litigation, if you need to use lawyers less, the costs come down dramatically. That's hugely important for insurers, and it's hugely important for insurance pricing, because every claim that is open, it costs an insurer money. One, because the claim can always go higher, but two, you have to put those funds in a separate account and make sure they're protected for when you come to pay it. Now, that is shareholder capital that is not delivering a return. So an insurance scale, these are big numbers. And I thought this was wonderful. We could get this information and we could change everything. And then I realized that the insurance world was going to be very slow to react. And then when I found out about the other golden thread, the legislation that's coming out, and that's when I realized that we had the opportunity to do something that could have a profound positive impact on all of us in the built environment with regards to insurance. But much more than that, would have a much more profound impact in increasing the insurability of mass timber in a built environment. And it's a key way that we can decarbonize our built environment. It needs to be thought of correctly. It needs to be executed correctly, designed correctly. But there's a lot of evidence to show that insurance is actually probably one of the key prohibitors to the use of mass timber. Indeed. Quite rightly, you need to appreciate risk and you need to mitigate risk. And so that's when I realized that we needed a platform such as Rosetta Risk Management to really extrapolate, to translate, hence the name, this information pool that we were having, this data pool that we were having, and maximize the value of that for the insureds, but also for the insurers.
So when you describe that kind of the platform effectively, as you said, aggregating this construction risk performance data, what does that mean in practical terms? What are you doing under the bonnet, as it were?
Yeah, so you have an individual construction project. So we take performance information from there. So what do I mean by that? Fundamentally, where you are against your schedule and where you are against your budget. But we can track a couple of other areas that insurers would deem to be quite relevant to the performance of that project. So, for example, health and safety instances, or actually any claims that may have occurred already. If we just go back to time and budget, you can imagine that if you look at your claims history, the vast majority of claims are happening on projects that are delayed and over budget, because one might need to cut corners, for want of a better phrase. So suddenly you can have that on a project by project basis. But if you then put that across the portfolio from an insurer's perspective, and if you then look at historical data, you can get some aggregate information there as to how things are going, for want of a better phrase. So you can start driving sort of near real-time information, matching that to historical data. And with that, you can then start looking at predictive analytics. So if we know that a project of a similar size, scale, type, location, it was tracking at a particular metric at a particular time, if you have enough of them, you can then start seeing if a project is actually falling outside of those metrics and may then lead to a problem. So it's a combination of that near real-time information and then matching that with historical data as well that gives us that insight.
Indeed, and Philip, you've mentioned something that's we've been looking at from a kind of a thought leadership perspective, is this whole opportunity of mass timber. And as you said, the insurance piece is often cited as being one of the barriers. I mean, is that altogether fair? And if so, how can your platform and the kind of data around this, as I guess for a lot of people, it's as you use the phrase, an unknown, it's a bit of an unknown quantity for certain people. So they're perhaps struggling to understand the risks and how to insure them, and how does that process work? And as I say, how can your platform help with this very laudable increase in the use of mass timber?
Yeah, it's for the most part, insurance is an issue when developers, owners are looking to secure to develop using mass timber. But justifiably so, because we don't have, as an insurance industry, a lot of data points. I'm not digressing, but bear with me. Wind power. Okay, I think as a general populace, as a society, we assume that wind power is not a problem, right? That it's all very easy and so on. Power gen in general, solar panels and so on. Actually, getting insurance for these types of power generation is really hard, and there's a very small marketplace for it. And that's because they come with some unique sets of challenges, right? They are not a nuclear station or a hydroelectric or whatever. They're putting some complex bit of tech. It's actually relatively basic, but it's heavy. It needs maintenance. It doesn't like water and rain and so on. Yet we're tending to put them on hills or offshore where it's windy and the weather's adverse for good reason.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, these risks are totally manageable. Good design, good maintenance, so on and so on, but it's still incredibly difficult to repair a wind turbine, to replace a generator at the top of a pole, at the top of a mountain, honestly. So they come with their challenges. Likewise, we all would probably aspire from an aesthetic perspective to live in a thatched cottage or something like that. Right? They're beautiful. But everyone knows that the insurance, your property insurance, is going to be really expensive because you have a thatched roof. So there are challenges that they're part of everyday life, and insurance is about taking a managed approach to indemnity, to risk transfer. You simply cannot expect a commercial business to just accept all of your risk. It doesn't happen anywhere. So there is an issue with insurance and mass timber. But what I have seen in my extensive research around this, and I'm co-author of the forthcoming Mass Timber Insurance Playbook, which comes out this May. We're recording this in March 23. This will be out by May. And really, that research made me realise that for the most part, our design community, in its broadest sense, do the right thing. Right, where we lose the relationship is in the presentation of that, and actually getting to grips with what's important and presenting that. There's a whole lot of nuances about the insurance market, where we are in terms of insurance cycles and so on and so on. It's been very easy to source construction and property insurance for well over 10 years. It's now very hard. There's a transition as people remember what it was like before 2008, and so that there are some idiosyncrasies around that. But we've been here before. It used to take us many months to place construction projects. We went to a phase where it would take us a week or a couple of days. Now we're back into the many, many months again. So presenting your risk is key. And collaboration is key, and early engagement is key. So these are challenges that we can address. But fundamentally, we then look at what insurance has in its suite of tools to manage risk. And really, we come back to physical site surveys. And what I would argue is pot luck surveying as to whether or not the construction project we're visiting needs to be surveyed, or if actually we're surveying the right ones. And we have no way of knowing, because the way we ingest performance is either from a performance update, a quarterly or monthly report that would tend to be written for any project finance requirements. And so we're always behind the curve, where actually all an insurer wants to do is make sure that you don't have a claim. So, and they have a lot of highly qualified, very experienced risk engineers that we can use really whenever we want in the insurance industry to help our customers that are in need. Yet we have no way of knowing, because the communication flow isn't there. So from a mass timber perspective, if we've got a material that we find difficult to insure for very valid reasons, if we can follow the journey, if we can identify in near real time if there are delays, if we can use technology to look at weather, if we can highlight that actually, guys, you might need to think about doing some things to mitigate risk, not removing the insurance cover that's there, not providing a rock in which you can be judged against negatively. That's not what insurers do, and there are protection under policies for that. But it's just sharing that information does a hell of a lot in terms of making that insurance contract palpable. I always remind people that an insurance contract is an offer and acceptance. There's no law, there's no legislation that says you must buy this. Yes, it will almost certainly be a requirement for your lenders, your project finance, but all of that is a commercial decision. If you have enough money, you can build something without an insurance. It's up to you.
Yeah.
I know that in practice that almost never happens, but if we think of it from a commercial sense, we have all won contracts and we've all lost contracts, right? No matter how good we are and successful we are and how amazing our business is. But the ones where we lose, we've probably failed to do something. And for the most part, with mass timber and insurance, it's communicate and give access to data, right? To be prepared to show how good you are will move the needle in a positive way. Data does that for us, right? Data does that for us in a frictionless way, in a efficient way. We don't have to spend time and money on upsetting project sites by demanding to come on and have a look, so on and so on. We can just do that from the systems that contractors are employing to reduce risk and improve productivity anyway. That's the only reason why they would spend the money on these systems. So we piggyback on the back of that. And that combined changes the goalposts from a mass timber perspective. Modern methods of construction in its entirety, to be honest, because there's a reason we didn't use these things in the first place. So now we're using them, and I appreciate technology has come on to a certain degree to assist in that, but we've tended to use the less risky, the less volatile modern methods of construction. So actually going forward, we need more information, we need more collaboration, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
So Philip, on that kind of theme of data and information, I think you mentioned some of these earlier, but obviously in the construction sector, it is becoming more digital. We have BIM, we have project management platforms, digital twins, common data environments. How do they help you? Because presumably they're providing you with this data that actually is ultimately what you need to provide this kind of landscape of information for the various stakeholders.
Yeah, it sounds quite complicated, but from an insurance perspective, it's relatively simple. We have at the core that performance data during the construction phase, and I'm very conscious that this is not uniform across all construction projects, but certainly the work that we've done would tell us that the leading contractors, irrespective of scale or size, the most forward-thinking contractors are using technology, and they're using that, as I mentioned, to reduce risk and improve productivity. If we look at the productivity side of that, that's just managing their business more efficiently. Now, we all know that construction projects are very complex, and it's very hard to get things right every day of the week and make sure that that day has been as efficient as possible. But tech significantly helps with that. BIM significantly helps with that, and I think it's sort of something that underpins it. Whether we're at the level of BIM that we need to, I think we're not yet. I think there's obviously some work to be done there. But putting that together, getting the information that we need, it's already created, right? You will know where you are, not maybe to the each second or each minute or each hour, but you will from a day to a week. Now that's the level of information that's really important. No one needs that really granular data, and it's also just too much, right? But it's not really relevant from an insurance perspective. But knowing where you are every week, or maybe every day, but maybe every week, every fortnight, maybe even once a month. These are in some instances very long projects, so it can be a bit overkill. I'm arguing that a contractor, and to a certain extent a developer, utilizing systems so they know exactly where they are, right? We're entering in a world of much more just-in-time deliveries, interconnected systems. We need these to be more efficient. This is what we're employing this technology for. So to get that information is a very easy exercise via API, and that's how we're going to do it.
So from a kind of perspective of the fact that obviously, even a simple construction project has lots of stakeholders involved, the funder, the sponsor, developer, the insurers obviously, and then the tiers of contractor. How does your platform almost work for all those different stakeholders? Because presumably they can all probably get something out of it if you have this kind of almost single source of truth of where are we on the project and what's the risk status almost.
Yeah, they can do. I mean, fundamentally, it's a poor phrase, but follow the money, right? The relationship between the developer and the insurer are key. Now, I say developer because for the most part there's project finance involved, and if there's project finance, you probably have some form of indemnity around delay. So only a developer can take that, an owner can take that cover out, a contractor can't. So if we just assume we're talking developer and insurer and the money, all those other parts, the contractor, the subcontractors, the architects, structurally, they're insured as well. So they're all part of this insurance policy. On-site physical loss or damage, right? Not PI. PI is secondary, although that is a very important area which we must come back to. But they're all part of the same thing. So if you're looking at lenders, developers, and insurers, all three of those want to know where you are at any moment in time for their own reasons, but all of that is financial, right? So there's an immediate vested interest in that. The contractor has a vested interest in knowing where he is just from a performance, his business, his costs, making sure he's maintaining his margin. So all of those people have a vested interest. The broker also has a vested interest. The broker is working for the developer. They are hugely important in this. They're hugely important in setting the terms of your deal, managing that relationship with the insurers. The broker's role is an excellent one and very important. They're a stakeholder as well. You can even go one step further and say reinsurers are stakeholders, but reinsurers tend to look at spreadsheets, not if you know what I mean. So it's an ancillary benefit to them, because knowing where you are in the insurance world, particularly with construction, has never been possible before now. And so therefore you can immediately get performance gains, financial gains that can be passed on to better serve your customers and therefore attract more income to your business as an insurer if you're more efficient with the information that you get. And that means you can run more efficiently.
So how long have you been going, and what sort of traction are you getting in the market? Because clearly there's a lot of benefit from what you've described. Are you bumping into much inertia, much kind of unfamiliarity with the idea of this kind of different approach?
Yeah, inertia was inevitable, but I think that's I'm not alone on that one.
Yeah.
No, so I started this journey in earnest just over a year ago. I left the MGA I was working at in February of last year, and we released our MVP. Well, we went live. We announced ourselves to the world in October, and we had our MVP just before Christmas. So I think we're doing okay in terms of traction. I can't mention any names, but we have got 3 large leading UK insurers, all with MOUs. With one of those who leads 3 of the UK's largest mass timber projects, which are just about to start in London. We are with one of those developers. We're in discussion with all 3 developers, but one has said, okay, let's progress this, let's go forward. So we'll be having conversations with the delivery team shortly, actually next Friday. I think we're scheduled to do that. So we're slowly getting there. Construction project, everything's often delayed in terms of before it starts the construction phase and so on and so on. So it is relatively slow. The feedback's been for the most part very good. It's not a difficult concept, but it is different, and there are some challenges, like with any new offering, new business around. Do I understand what you're saying? So for the most part, it's been received off the bat. It's quite obvious, but it's quite clear that we've got some work to do, both to refine our messaging, but also there's some aspects that we're focusing on that are actually that important. So we're working on that. What's much more interesting from a product offering is what we can combine with and what we can bring to market. So we're collaborating with a handful of other tech providers. We collaborate with a project management platform, cited. So we have an API with cited. So that's great validation, because they are sitting there going, okay, we see this. We see the information that our customers are generating on our platform. So I'll take an example. On cited, you can you do your reporting with regards to Part L and Regulation 38. Now let's assume this is a mass timber building. The information that you're collating for those 2 documents, those 2 compliance pieces, is game-changing for insurers, right? If you're looking to insure the property the first year of that mass timber building, that's really important. If you overlay that with some image capture validation, which from a financial point is very cheap in relation to your project, you have a data pack there that can be presented to your insurers. If you have a system that links that in with the performance of the construction project as it's being built, you have the regulatory piece, which is not in itself insurable, but it leads to the ticking of the boxes that an underwriter needs to actually be able to offer insurance, right? That's just part of good underwriting review. You suddenly have a very efficient way of understanding if that mass timber building is what it should be, what it was designed to be, and does it meet all the requirements that it should do. And the system can do that. Now that's really exciting from that collaboration point of view. And we see that with the lead insurer that we're working with. They see that because one of the key factors there that we're exploring is to be able to offer first-year property cover along with the construction cover. Now, we do this in areas such as power generation and so on, where you can often have a bit of a blurred line between what is testing, actually revenue generating, and power gen. A lot of testing, you're actually selling the power, but is that construction? Is it operational? Depending on the power purchase agreement, so on. So this is something we've tried and tested in the world of construction and property insurance. But it's the huge facilitator for mass timber, because actually the construction insurance policy is a challenge, but it's addressable. A developer, the money knowing that they can get property insurance in 2 to 3 years, and at the moment that is a big question mark. Any board, any competent people are going to go, well, should we use mass timber if I don't know that I can even buy, irrespective of premium, if I can even buy property cover? I totally accept that is a massive issue. If we can address that, and if we can use data to cover that, that is such a step forward for us as a society, right? That answers all the questions you need from an insurance perspective. It validates the building, which is really important for future as well, if we're looking at golden thread legislation and so on. But it's important from an IDI perspective. Warranties may not be so relevant from a commercial perspective, but if we were building resi, very much relevant. So if you mix in the other tech from the image capture on that, so we're having those discussions with a company that does that. And again, when I look at the pricing of these things, and I look at the insurance pricing and premiums and so on, we can quickly see that there's value to be had, and we use a couple of metric or a couple of validation points from the US where they use technology with regards to workers' comp, employees' liability insurance. It's much the litigious nature of the US and awards and so on means that really builders risk, constructional risk is the third insurance policy behind a surety bond and workers' comp. Now they're already one step ahead using data, using these platforms that are managing people and saying, well, if you use these, we'll give you a discount on your insurance, because if you're using it, you must be treating your people, or you must be able to spot issues before they become claims. So we have the validation for this from that sector. So it's quite exciting. I've probably got a long-winded way of not answering the question.
No, I think no, and I suppose what fascinates me is listening to you speak there is and I think this is so common across the property sector, is that once you build a data set for one purpose around a building, it immediately opens up all those other use cases, to use the jargon, because you build a good quality trusted set of data about a building, and suddenly it opens up a whole bunch of use cases in addition to the one that you first did it for, because you've talked obviously, very cogently about the benefit from this kind of property insurance perspective, but it's the other things that it opens up to. Back to the golden thread, fire safety. Once you've got a decent set of information about a building, there's so many other lines of businesses that can utilize that, aren't there?
If we look at that from an insurance perspective, what more cover can we sell you, right? Yeah. So we're sort of friends with a really cool company called EHAB, and they're working out a way of giving parametric cover from weather events, and they will look at weather, historical data, and they'll look at scheduling. Josh, there, if you're, great, I love it. Being able to use technology to deliver another form of indemnity that is really hard to deliver without the tech, or even impossible. Brilliant. And you can see, as a customer, or sorry, as an insurer, if you're offering that type of parametric cover, you can see if the customer's actually doing what they should be doing. You've suddenly got something that as a potential customer that directly affects your business in a positive sense, for relatively, and you can then look at the cost benefit of that premium. The really interesting bit will become around the preventative and what we can do around, well, this was about to happen and you needed to spend some more money to prevent it. Now there are metrics for that within construction policies already, which we will not go into today because that's but obviously, insurers will happily spend to prevent, right? But there's a contractual framework. Information allows us to do that much more efficiently, to bring in new cover. Another area that I think is something that we haven't even scratched the surface of, and I think this is super important, is the carbon footprint of the building at design versus the carbon footprint of the building at completion. Now, we know what EU taxonomy is, and we know we're fast going into a world where we will be penalised for not delivering on the statements that we make around carbon. If you're a developer, maybe a public company, or you fall within the rules of EU taxonomy, you're making statements about the carbon footprint of a building, and when it's built, it's different from a negative perspective. I think that's insurable. There is an insurable interest there. There's a performance aspect to that, but we can't do that without effective measurements and tracking of the project during its construction phase. In theory, we could now do something about that tomorrow, and I think we will see people demanding that level of cover, but it would probably go onto a PI policy, and you don't want it on a PI policy because PI insurance is going through the roof. It's going through the roof due to legal fees, right? And yet we have a system of project management platforms, of being able to take photos of non-deletable, auditable decision trees, for want of a better phrase, on these platforms, that any competent loss adjuster, if they're being used or if they're made available or if they even know about them, can look at and very quickly, well, the architect said yes or no. I can see that here. Or the contractor said, this wasn't possible and was given the wrong advice. We can see this straight away. That reduces all of those legal fees, all of the premiums that are going rapidly rising. You can remove that with information, with data. And the architects I talked to, the structural engineers, oh no, we do that. Well, let's get this out there into the insurance to save you money. You're already creating the information that will save you money. So,
you speak, Philip, as if this overall kind of journey of digitization is almost unstoppable. I mean, are you seeing any? We talked about inertia earlier, but you've talked about a lot of things that seem to support this. Do you see any kind of barriers to stopping this very positive digitization happening, not only continuing in the construction sector, but obviously almost spilling over into the insurance sector?
I think the biggest barrier is people's concerns, and rightly so, over data and who's sharing it and who is seeing it. Much like with a mortgage or with your lenders or with your insurers, if you're in that contract, you have a duty of disclosure. You have, and look, there are levels of that. Just as a broad brush, certainly before an insurance contract is bound, there's a level of duty to disclose, and then if things change, you should be informing your insurers, otherwise you may find yourself in a rather difficult position. As I started on the journey around and started to understand the digitalization and how far we were into this, I think the key theme is collaboration. And I think we're seeing it, the most forward-thinking contractors are changing the way that they collaborate with their employers. I think we're going to see the employers, the developers insisting, because of legislation, golden thread on that collaboration. So I think we will see the issues around data, whilst not by being just as important, but by people saying, no, it's okay to share. Now, if there is a secure framework in which you can share that makes it easy. So we have that already with project management platforms. Right? They're there, with all the stakeholders on there. We can have that for insurance, and we can unlock the value of that very easily. It's a question of choice, right? Ultimately, do we want to do that? Do we want to share that? Yes or no? And I think money will probably grease those wheels of acceptance.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, Philip, isn't it, in conclusion, that so often the technology is available. It's down to behaviours and collaboration to actually take advantage of the things that actually are already there. We're not really lacking in technology and platforms. It's that collaboration. It's that desire to do things differently. And as you say, I think critically in a sector that is so fragmented and historically hasn't been really either comfortable or able to share data, that we need to share data in a way that's governed but has so many outcomes. Well, it's been fascinating to talk, Philip, and I do look forward to catching up again in the future. But for today, thanks ever so much for your time, and look forward to speaking again.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.